I'm delighted to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast, Lisa Evans. Lisa, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
We had a great chat. So I actually appeared on Lisa's podcast and we had a great chat about facilitation. I thought, look, you are an expert on this field, and as well as speaking and coaching and everything else that you do as well. But for those listeners who haven't heard the conversation on your podcast, can you share with them a bit about your story, how you discovered the world of workshops, facilitation, and the work that you do today?
Yeah, so I began my career as a midwife many, many years ago. So I trained as a nurse, then became a midwife. I specialized in neonatal intensive care, looking after tiny babies. That was my ticket into Australia. I'm originally from London, and I spent 25 years, almost 25 years in that career. Then I had a massive curveball when a virus destroyed most of my hearing. So the nerves were damaged and the hearing loss was permanent. I had a tiny amount of sound on one side only, and that was the end of my career. So having to walk away from my career, later in life, I was already 40, was a challenge. And I was left with this, what on earth am I going to do? So I finished off an MBA that I'd sort of half-assed, started when the kids were little. And I moved into the Department of Health, which turned out to be not healthy at all. It was quite a toxic work environment. And as a result of that, I really lost a lot of self-confidence and self-esteem. I stopped speaking up and became very withdrawn and isolated. So not only was I trying to navigate permanent hearing loss, but also that social isolation and everything that comes with that, and navigating a new career. So I was fortunate enough to get on a research trial and get the amazing gift of a cochlear implant. And that was the beginning of a whole new journey in not only learning to hear and speak again. Of course, if you can't hear properly, it impacts the way that you speak, but also discovering public speaking and storytelling. I mean, I've always told stories. I think we all have, but I grew up we didn't have TV until the 76 Olympics, when Dad came home with a color one. So I grew up on stories and books. And stories was also a way that we got through the day as a young nurse. We didn't have things like psychological support or EAP programs or debriefing. We just sucked it up and got on with it, and saw incredible trauma and suffering. And stories were the way that we helped to get over our own, emotional stuff with our colleagues. And these days, so I went on this sort of big discovery journey of speaking and storytelling. And when I decided to do something, I jumped right in, Leanne. So I sought out like the best speakers and mentors and coaches from around the world. I probably overcoached myself and you go just one more course and just one more book, and probably could have started my business earlier. But in 2014, I started my first business, Speaking Savvy, and I became a certified speaker coach, and just love empowering others to step up and share their voice. So once I was on a radio show once, and when they wrote up the blurb about the interview, the headline they gave me was losing her hearing, she discovered her voice. And I thought, I like that. I'll keep that one. And that's what I really like to do. Somebody else gave me the tagline of the story midwife, because I do still bring new life into the world, but in the form of story. So these days I focus on business storytelling and primarily helping leaders in the mining resources sector, which is huge in West Australia, to be better storytellers, to really add storytelling to their soft skill toolkit, and to be able to enhance their often technical presentations using metaphor and case studies and anecdotes and stories, using the arc. And sometimes I pinch myself at the end of the day when I look back and go, hey, I make a living out of telling stories and helping other people to tell stories. So isn't it wonderful?
It is wonderful. I'm so inspired by that story, particularly as hearing at the age of 40, you pretty much possibly felt like you were starting again. And I think sometimes even when we look at pivoting, we think, oh gosh, I'm taking 2 steps back. And we always want things to work out immediately. So I found that story, well, first of all, the way that you crafted it as well was beautiful. I was extremely I just felt taken into that. So thanks for sharing that. I do have a question around the leaders in the resources industry. I've worked in mining out of Queensland, and I know what leaders are like in those businesses. I know how there's time pressure, there's money, and it's often about the short term and just getting the project done. So when do leaders come to you and ask you about storytelling, or has something happened where they've been nominated, they need to win a client project, or like when do they actually reach out to you and recognize that they need this skill?
Yeah, sometimes it may be part of their soft skill development. So I do teach public speaking and presentation skills. I've got a sort of a signature program called Communicate with Influence, which includes storytelling. So sometimes I introduce it that way. And other leaders reach out and they understand the power of storytelling, and they know that it's a thing that they have to get better at if they want to influence and they want to engage and they want to get their message across in a way that others care, but they don't know the how to. So often the call might be, one of our leaders at the top has said, storytelling, we want you to disseminate the information about the new change or the new strategy in the form of stories. And a lot of my clients are technical people and engineers, black and white, logical, and all of a sudden they've got to be creative and come up with a story, and it's the how to. So then they Google me and say, we need to learn how to tell better stories.
And you probably, when you're with them, I mean, the storytelling is like the in, but then I'm sure that they're exposed to then the other things that you teach in terms of their delivery style and crafting that too. So how do you work with clients, and do you sort of, I'm sure people come to you, use that really amazing phrase of people discovering their own voice, and you help people develop the confidence to speak up and share their ideas. What are some of the blocks that are preventing us from speaking up, from being a contributor in a meeting, from volunteering to share something in a virtual call?
I think the big one would be the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome of that. I don't have anything interesting to say, or I'm not important enough, or my ideas won't be heard. So it can be self-doubt, it can be an internal thing, but I think that psychological safety is a huge thing. And I've certainly been part of organizations where speaking out would often mean being ridiculed or put down, so people end up not speaking up if they feel that the environment's not safe, or they don't feel that they're appreciated. So it can be external or internal. And then of course we've got our introverts in the room who like to think first, speak later. And sometimes meetings are not set up the best way for introverts, and they'll have their best idea when they sit back down at their desk. And if a leader hasn't accommodated and thought about everyone's contribution in the meeting, then those great ideas are lost.
And there was a LinkedIn thread from our mutual friend Julian Mather earlier this week where we're talking about appearing on camera, and I was sharing, as an extrovert, sometimes I find it hard if I'm just in a room speaking to this glass lens, like I have no energy, it's fizzling. And then you piped up and I'm surprised. So you're an introvert, Lisa. Can you tell us more about the power of being an introvert when it comes to speaking and communicating?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating area. I grew up as a shy kid, and I was always sort of encouraged or led to believe that if you want to make it in life, you've got to be extroverted. Mum would say, come out of your shell, or the cat got your tongue. That was one of her many expressions. And so I learned from an early age to behave in an extrovert way. But of course, we can't sustain that over a lifetime. And it was only when I began to understand more about introversion and the fact that it is really only a style and the way that we like to recharge, rather than it typically being associated with we don't like people or we're shy, which is absolutely not true, that I began to embrace it more. And then I started to find more authors such as Susan Cain and Beth Buelow and the amazing Megumi Miki from Melbourne, and many others who write around introversion. I recently did an episode on my podcast, Business Chat Podcast, if I can diverse a little bit. And one was with Megumi Miki, who writes about the power of introverts. And another one is with a lady called Joanna Rawbone from the UK, who's got a podcast and a program called The Flourishing introvert. So it's not only recognizing that you do have a tendency towards introversion, but it's about harnessing that and really using it as a superpower. So, I began to get more comfortable in my own skin and began to realize that, hey, introversion is really a superpower. But I'm one of those introverts who doesn't necessarily behave in an introvert way. I'm very happy, camera, microphone, stage, love it, love people, but I also love being alone. When I'm alone is when I'm probably most creative, and I can get overstimulated by other people, and I prefer quality conversations rather than quantity.
I'd have to, yeah, I agree with that as well. I sort of often joke on this show that I think people expect, I am an extrovert, but I'll go to a dog park at the end of the day after running Zoom sessions, and the dogs are socializing, but I'm like a solo human and I just don't want to have the small talk. So I think it's absolutely
well, in our line of business, facilitation training, it is, we're on from the moment we, get out of the car, really. People watch us as speakers and the people who are leading the room. If we're in the lineup for coffee outside, or we're, even in the bathroom, I feel like you're on before you're on, almost, if you get that. And we're constantly, a good facilitator is constantly reading the room, adapting their style, looking out for, am I meeting their needs? Do they look comfortable? Are they engaged? So it is really, you're using a lot of your antenna and your senses, as well as staying across your material. And, like you, my content is all customized. It's not cookie cutter stuff. So I feel quite exhausted at the end of a day of training. I feel sort of full. It does fill my cup, and I feel a lot of joy that I've empowered others, particularly if I get that, I get it now, or, that's been really helpful. And when I hear, this is what I'm going to take away, I love that. It really does make me feel great that I've helped others. But boy, when I get home, I do not want to speak. And sometimes I can't, sometimes I try and speak and it's almost gibberish. My husband goes, what?
I was talking to Mark Bowden over in Canada. He's a body language expert. And he says that after his speeches, he just will not drive home because he's that physically exhausted. He won't even drive himself home. So it was really reassuring to hear that as well. So in terms of let's talk about your design. You said you don't do cookie cutter workshops, and a lot of stuff is your own material. Can you share a bit of insight into how you do design your workshops? Is it based around your IP or frameworks? Do you pull in stuff from other people? What goes into great workshop design for you?
Yeah, all of those things. So definitely, using quotes and ideas from others is an awesome thing to do. Obviously, we're always citing the source and giving recognition to our colleagues. I've always got an extra big bag because I love to take with me books and extra resources. People often say, what book shall I get? And I like to be able to accommodate the people who want to go deeper, as well as those who want the higher level, because we've always got a mixture in the room. So rather than overloading people with information, I like to give a little bit of an overview, go give them maybe 3 steps. And then I'll say, if you want to find out more, you can go and look at Joseph Campbell's 17 Steps of the Hero's Journey if you want to, and give them the resource. And often people will email and go, I want to know more about, and I've got lists of things, but I don't give them all to people in the workshop. So definitely books I take with me. I refer to TED Talks and case studies. A lot of my material is my own stories, because I'm a storyteller. I've got a huge repertoire of stories, and, every point has a story that helps back it up. So a lot of that is mine. So in terms of workshop design, obviously listening to the client and finding out what they want, and having a good understanding of who's going to be in the room. I mean, in terms of my typical workshop attendees who are from the resources sector, it could be from sort of frontline health and safety, environmental reps, up to the executive team. So obviously we're adapting depending on what it is that they want to get out of the workshop. Yeah, so the health and safety reps are doing startup meetings and talking to their peers on the ground, on site, different techniques and skills compared to, C-suite. So finding out who's coming along and tailoring that way, and also very much adapting on the fly. So I've always got more slides than I need, so I can kind of navigate, I can sneakily navigate my way through my slide deck because I know it inside out, and chop and change material without the participants knowing. It's fairly seamless now. And if I get a few questions, or if they've raised at the beginning, hey, this is what we really want to get out of today, I might think, okay, well, the majority want to go a little bit deeper on confidence. Let's go down there. And, I can pull up a few more links that I've got embedded where we can show little videos, or we can do a little exercise. So it really is organic, I guess. It's organic. And I think that, we say when we've had previous lives and previous careers that we bring our skills with us, even though we might not realize at the time, particularly if you're having a big career change like I did. But as a midwife, I'm not only nurturing, but also in a firm way, but I'm very intuitive. So nurses have got this kind of inner gut stuff and that's really served me well as a speaker and a facilitator. So I'm fairly comfortable and pretty good, I think, at being able to determine, when to give more and when to pull back, which is all part of good facilitation.
Yeah. Do you know Bob Dick in Brisbane?
I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with his
the only reason I
material.
ask him, so the reason I've discovered Lisa's work before we actually met was she had a contribution, or a couple of contributions, in a book called The Story Cookbook with Andrew Rickson and Dr. Catherine Lloyd. Bob's a friend of Catherine, so I thought there was a connection.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I do. Now you've told me the context, Leanne. Of course. Yes, I've met Bob. I've been to every story conference for the last when they were on for the last decade. So yes, I have met Bob. Apologies.
Oh,
yes.
That's okay. Yeah, because he talks about what you were just saying before about when to increase the energy and when to decrease the energy. And I think there's sometimes can be an assumption, and like, I know when I was a first time facilitator, I would see these really energetic facilitators, and all day they're like bouncing off the walls. And so how do you do that? And then Bob
Too
said,
much.
well, yeah, when the group has the high energy, you can reduce yours. When they've got reduced energy, you can increase yours. It was like, oh, that's a really, really fascinating insight.
Yeah, it's like ebb and flow, isn't it? And it's almost like you're partnering. You're partnering with the people in the room, but also using the energy as well. And how many times as facilitators do we go to a fancy hotel and the room is either too cold, too hot? It's never just right. You have these Goldilocks moments where you're constantly trying to tweak the air conditioner, or normally I assign the person that happens to sit under the air conditioner, because as facilitators we might go hot, and usually more hot than cold. And that's something that can be really like a bit of a deal breaker in terms of people's learning and people's attention and people's engagement. And how many times do you go and ask your host, or the person from the hotel is looking after you, go, oh, no, that's all centralized, we can't turn down the heating. And you're like, what? People are cooking in the workshops.
Yeah. Or like sun streaming in, you can't close. Like these physiological things actually really matter. And I was joking, one of my 7 tips, I did this episode years ago. One of the things I said there was actually good catering does matter, because if the catering sucks, it's like a lower level need that people keep picking it up and it's not satisfied, then you can't get onto like the motivators. It's a hygiene factor. I think good catering.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of spaces that you go to, you look around and you think, if only they'd asked a professional speaker or trainer about the layout, we would have said, this is not going to work, having the door there, or have you thought about this? And often spaces, particularly conference spaces, are organized more to meet the needs of the catering staff than that, which is fair enough. It's their workplace, but poorly designed for the speaker. So design really does matter. And I'm sure you've got your favorite spaces that you like to facilitate in, and those that you find a little bit clunky. And if we do feel a little bit clunky or awkward in a space, it's then we got to make more effort to be able to show up and give 100%.
I remember there was one room in Hong Kong that we used, and it had no natural light. And I think it was like the third session on the Friday afternoon, we discovered that there was a way of actually opening. There was some weird way of opening the windows. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a lost opportunity. And just having the light streaming through. But it was like right at the end that we discovered that. I guess that's one of the pros of moving to virtual, is that we don't have to deal with some of those things that we can't control. But Lisa, I'm curious, how have you, I mean, over the last 18 months, I know COVID hasn't impacted as badly as it has in other parts of the world and the East Coast right now. Have you moved much of your work to virtual, and how are you finding that, if so?
Well, I was always doing virtual before, because as an executive speaker coach, I've got clients all over the world. So Zoom is not a new thing for me. Training online, I was only doing a small amount before COVID. And I've also been used to the hybrid with some in the room, some on the screen model for a while, because a lot of my clients, they've got a FIFO workforce.
Yes.
However, the equipment and the technology has got better these days. So I did do a little bit of adapting, and I took some time off, actually. I wanted to hang back, and I saw that a lot of my speaker colleagues were rushing into, creating studios and even reducing their prices and changing their offerings. And, something that I picked up, which really resonated with me when I went to the Professional Speakers Conference in Adelaide, just as COVID struck in March last year, was a profound insight that I got from Michael McQueen. And he said, whatever you do, stay true to your values when you leave here. And it's not part of my values to suddenly, change and bring out a new program that I'm not familiar with, or reduce my prices. So I just thought, I'm going to sit back and wait and have a little bit of time off and see what happens. Now, we were only sort of 4 or 5 months without face-to-face stuff. But what I did is, rather than go out to market, I kept in touch with my existing clients, and most of them have workforces around the world. So then they were able to, suddenly they realized the power of online. Yeah. And then they would say, oh, would you be able to train our team in Shanghai, or would you be able to touch base with some of our people in Hong Kong? So I managed to get some work through that. And so I wasn't one of those who sort of did the massive pivot and change.
The hustle.
I was more of a let's wait and see about this. And I did invest in a few things. My number one investment that I absolutely love is my stand-up desk. Wouldn't do without it. I got a couple of new microphones and some softbox lights. And that's about it, really.
It was really interesting to see how everyone reacted in that space of last year. And I remember with this podcast, I kind of just for 3 months, it was basically the First Time Virtual Facilitator podcast, because we're like, what tech tools do we get? And now the questions are really around, instead of the tech, everyone's sorted. It's like, how do we engage and get the best out of this? Good point, though, on hybrid. There's all this content out right now about how we're going to adjust to hybrid. But I mean, I worked in the Kimberley for a while, Lisa. So we were calling in campuses across Broome, Derby, Kununurra. I worked for Accenture. We had teams in India. This is back in 2006. We were working hybrid. It's not a new thing, but everyone's sort of freaking out about it. So what are your thoughts on hybrid work, and are you doing much of that now in terms of the training still? It's continuing that way?
Yeah, a fair bit. So a couple of things. I think it's really important at the discovery stage to be really clear on who's in the room and who's not in the room. It doesn't work as well when on the day they say, oh, by the way, Freddie and Joe are joining from wherever, because it's important that it's essential that the people on the call feel as welcome and included as the people in the room. So you're really considering whoever's on the other end of the camera as somebody sitting in a chair. And that's how I think of them in my mind. And I use a lot of resources and different sort of props and cards and other things so that we can make use of the kinesthetic way that we learn. And if people are going to be on the screen and they're missing out on that, it's not the full experience for them. So I've got to then think in my design, okay, if there are 2 people on the call, I've got to somehow get the information to them, or if it means that they're going to miss out, not use that particular activity with particular cards. Because I know what it's like to be stuck on the end of a call and not feel like you're part of the group. So that may mean ordering extra resources. It might mean sending off packages to people. And the other thing that I'm really sort of fussy and strict on is the design process. As you would know, the design process and the delivery for online is completely different to face-to-face. So and I've been, we've had lockdown, in and out of lockdown, and I hear of people or clients sometimes say, oh, we're not able to have that face-to-face, let's just switch it online. Well, it's not as easy as that, because it's a different delivery style, it's a different design. And it sets off a bit of an alarm bell for me if I'm enrolled in something and they say, oh, we're going to switch it online, and it just doesn't work. The flip chart and the camera and the person doing the writing. No, that's not how online works. So I always say to my clients, if we want to do that, we can't do it tomorrow. That's a different design. And if we haven't factored that in the proposal, do you quickly change when you design a course? Or a workshop, have you designed it with the 2 modes of delivery in mind?
No, I haven't. It's either, so I'm the same as you. I don't translate it. I have to reimagine it, and I actually charge more if that's the case. Yeah. And I actually talked to my booked out facilitator group the other day, and some people are charging less, some people are charging the same, but I think it actually requires a lot more, the design. But yeah, so that was an interest. It really depends on the context and what's actually happened. And if it's easy, if it's an easy one to move online, done. Like if I've already done something like that, that's not a problem. It's when it's, oh, there's something like significant, there's a lot of people in this, we really need to reshape.
But I think that in terms of the environment, obviously we get there early and we set up the room as we want, but little things that maybe inexperienced facilitators wouldn't have come across, and that is, if you've got the board style set up with 12 people, you move the chairs that are in front of the cameras, because those people that are on the camera, which is usually mounted on the wall, well, they're sitting that side of the table. They're not, you wouldn't put people around that side. So, you've got to tweak your room as well.
Yeah, you're right. And it's not until you maybe suddenly thrust into it, like, okay, we've got to really consider this, because this isn't working at the moment. Even audio, the microphones still aren't that great with picking up everyone in the room if there's someone dialing in. So there's a lot of progress to be made. Lisa, I love to ask guests what their favorite icebreaker or energizer is. Do you have one that you'd like to share with the group?
Oh gosh, I've got that many. It really does obviously depend on the group. I mean, there's nothing better than getting people moving.
Yeah.
And, I'm all about creating a safe space. So I'd never want to use an icebreaker or energizer that makes people, do the eye roll or feel uncomfortable. So it depends on the group. I mean, if it's say like a large group of emerging leaders, beginning public speaking, and I want to get a gauge of how fearful they are about public speaking. I'm not going to go hands up if you are terrified of public speaking. They're probably not going to in front of their peers, but it's useful for me to know where they sit in the room, comfortable versus, terrified. So I might do a series of short sociometrics to just get people to move around the room, order themselves. We'll start off with fairly simple questions, who likes coffee? And it's always fascinating to see a group of highly intelligent people trying to organize themselves in a room. Obviously, you need a fair bit of space to do that sort of. Do you use sociometrics and get people moving
Yeah,
around?
definitely. Yeah. And sometimes I'll put the tape on the floor just to give some guidance. Because the good thing about that is the volume also increases as a result. The energy is increasing with the movement, people laughing.
Absolutely.
You haven't done any, you just asked a question and it just energy goes up.
And then I can, then they feel safer, and then I can say, okay, organize yourself now in the line. If you love public speaking and you're quite comfortable to be up here where I am, you want to swap places, over there. If you terrified of public, and they don't mind then organizing themselves in the line, because we've had a bit of fun with it. So that might be something that I do. I wouldn't do that with a group of executives if we're doing advanced presentation skills. Obviously, the time of day is also really important, but there's nothing better than getting up and moving. And sometimes we think of energizers as, something special where it can literally be, okay, let's get up out of our chairs. And most of the people that I work with are very good at recognizing that they need that standing time. A lot of people have got smartwatches, it's time to stand up, and people just stand behind their chairs for a bit.
Yeah, I do like to say to my participants, do what it takes to manage your own energy. If you need to stand, that's fine. Grab water, all of that. What would your advice be for first-time facilitators, for people that would love to do what we do, run workshops?
Just go out and do it.
Great advice.
And I think that by planning, often I also train speakers to go pro. And I think that, sometimes you can wait around quite some time for that call or that email when somebody says, hey, would you like to come and present? So I say to people, be proactive, make it happen, organize your own little workshop. And then, you get to do it all, and you can host a group of people and try it out, see what works. In the early days, you need that social proof, you need those testimonials, you need that feedback form, you need to try things out and tweak it. And you want to be able to do that gradually. So start small, but start is the most important thing. You don't need to do another course or read another book, because we can just never stop when we get into that mindset. And there are great resources such as your podcast and many books and groups that you can join and ask people, what works for them.
Yeah. Well, speaking of great resources, Lisa, where can we send people who would like to find out more about your business, your work, your podcast as well?
Sure. Yeah. My podcast is called Business Chat with Lisa Evans. It comes out weekly. Each week I chat with an inspiring leader in business. And you've been on my show, Leanne, a few weeks back. And that's across all the podcast platforms. My business is speakingsavvy.com.au, and social media, my space of preference is LinkedIn, most definitely, but I am on most other platforms. Yeah. And I've got there is a link if people want a 30-minute call with me. Love hearing stories. I can help you shape and tweak your story in that 30 minutes. So if you want to book a call, hop on my website and the link is there for you to do that.
Amazing. Oh, Lisa, I might have to book in for one of those calls. I'm sure a lot of my stories could be shaped and improved. It's been wonderful chatting. Yeah, wonderful chatting and connecting with you again. Thank you so much for being on the show, sharing your amazing tips, practical ones, but also the mindset behind it as well, and just getting started. That's a sign to you. If you're listening now and you want to become a facilitator, stop listening, start your workshop. Lisa, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanne.